Good.
Okay.
There's lots of different things, different types of design guidance, and some of them are called design codes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have anything specific about them. Design codes may be more precise or prescriptive, but there's a whole load of things, and it can be very confusing. I'm going to show you a few pictures and 4 slides of words, of which this is the first one. Design codes set out more detailed rules and instructions for designing 2- and 3-dimensional design elements of a site or area's development. Design codes can be particularly useful in complex situations where a number of different people and organizations need to come to an agreement about the form of development. The process of drawing up a design code enables them to find common ground and record their conclusions in written and graphic form in a way that will be easily understood by those who implement the development. The white paper. That's right. In growth areas where no one lives, developers will be able to do whatever they want. In renewal areas where most people live, the quality of development will be guided by design codes, which, as everyone knows, almost never work. In protected areas where people like me live, we'll have a proper planning system. As with master plans, many design codes are not implemented. Some are enormously long documents written to assure the planning authority that the development receives planning permission will be of a high standard of design. Later, a developer applying for detailed planning permission may convince the planners that conditions have changed enough to justify the design code being set aside. Familiar. Sorry if I'm being dim, but can you explain how the white paper can propose a new planning system based on design coding when the number of planners with the ability to organize and write an enforceable design code can be counted on the fingers of one hand? The best design codes are the result of a great deal of collaborative work involving communities and stakeholders and creative thought about the design of development that will suit a particular place. They clarify and streamline the regulatory process, reducing uncertainty. What is coded will depend on the circumstances. Architectural style can be coded, but many codes specify matters of urban design, such as building heights, building lines, and types of street, and leave architectural style up to the designers. This is Upton, town extension on the edge of Northampton, designed to a design code, which specifies different types of streets. It says there aren't just things called streets. There are different types of streets, and we need to code them to specify how they should work. And they're main street, streets, lanes, mews, and streets with SUDs, sustainable drainage, which is actually needed because there's so much impermeable parking space that there's an enormous water runoff that has to be dealt with. So this is a mew street, and here's the design code for Upton, setting out how a mew street will be designed. Very prescriptive, precise, because it's a very specific kind of street, and the streets have been built. This is one of the developments in Upton, design coded. It doesn't code for architecture. It codes for, well, you can guess, the things like the building frontage, the maximum height of the buildings. Poundbury does code for architecture. It can be vernacular, as in this street, but of course, defining vernacular is tricky because vernacular building was built because that's the way local building traditions and technology dictated in the past. Now there's different ways of living and different building technologies, building regulations. So if we want to make something look vernacular, we have to have a very clever code to decide how that's done. Again, Poundbury, the other choice, if it's not vernacular, then it's classical. But the traditional classical buildings were designed according to a tradition, hand-built by people with experience of building classical buildings. how do we build classical buildings today in very different circumstances? Newhall Harlow, neither vernacular or classical. Other things are specified, trying to code how to make a particular kind of street. And also, in this case, coding for the color. They put a lot of work into deciding what local colors were predominant in the existing natural and built environment, and how these should be reflected in the new buildings. And so the code specifies the colors. But then some people built buildings that weren't quite the specified color, and it turned out not to be enforceable. So a code has to be enforceable. We've heard about Nance Leyden in Cornwall. So here's the vision that they're trying to create, a seaside chocolate box community. The Code of Design and Community Standards in such a form as notified by His Royal Highness. An obligation not to do or admit to do any act or thing includes an obligation not to permit or allow that act or thing to be done or to be omitted to be done on pain of death. Coding things like lintels. So they look at the local vernacular, local ways of buildings and say, right, lintels should be in one of these particular kinds. Again, as we've heard before, we need to decide, is this important? What's really important? Why are we insisting on it? Here is the permitted paint colours in Nance Leyden, trying to make it fit into the local vernacular. And here's the result. And in a way, all the details are coded, but some of the big things maybe can't be coded because the development's being sold on the housing market and delivered by volume house builders. So we have to decide what's important. Design codes are often used for large-scale developments, but they can also guide small-scale, self-built or self-procured developments. A local authority might adopt a design code that applies to a range of building types across its area, setting out what building forms will be acceptable. A code can be adopted as a supplementary planning document or appended to a neighbourhood plan, community right to build order, or neighbourhood development order. And final slide, the process can be quite complicated, and it needs a lot of input. Here's a possible process through time, thinking about why we need a code, designing the code, delivering it, managing the process, making sure that the what's built is monitored and enforced. Input from a specialist process. If the public ain't to be involved, then that takes a lot of skills and resources. You need the skills and resources of people who know how to create design codes, and it's a tricky business. We need to decide how it relates to existing policy and guidance, and so on. So if we're going to have real design codes, we need to make sure that we know what we're doing. It's not just a bit of paper. It's a process. And if it works, it can be very effective and important. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. That's absolutely great.